The sound of heavy machinery tearing through concrete echoes across the suburban street as Sarah Martinez watches her dream pool disappear into rubble. But when her neighbor Karen storms across the yard, eyes blazing with fury, Sarah realizes this isn't just about a pool anymore. "You think you can destroy my children's happiness and get away with it?" Karen screams, her perfectly manicured finger jabbing toward Sarah's chest. What started as a property dispute is about to become a war that will shatter two families, expose buried secrets, and prove that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to destroy everything else. The hammer is already falling, and there's no going back. The pneumatic drill bit into the concrete with surgical precision, each strike sending tremors through the ground that Sarah Martinez felt in her bones. She stood on her back deck, coffee, mug trembling in her hands as she watched $20,000 of her retirement savings being reduced to chunks of debris. The crystal blue water that had once reflected summer skies now drained in muddy rivulets toward the storm gutter, carrying with it 3 years of carefully cultivated peace. "Ma'am, you sure about this?" The demolition foreman, a weathered man named Pete, whose company shirt was already soaked through with morning sweat, paused to wipe his brow. "Pool like this in this neighborhood could have gotten good money selling. It with the house." Sarah's grip tightened around her mug. Through the kitchen window, she could see her 17-year-old daughter Emma hunched over textbooks at the dining table, dark circles under her eyes that had nothing to do with studying. 3 months since Emma had stopped sleeping through the night, since she'd started having panic attacks in broad daylight, since she'd begged her mother through tears to make it stop. "I'm sure," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the yard, with more conviction than she felt. The drilling resumed, each impact a small victory against the chaos that had invaded their lives. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself remember what this yard used to be like. Quiet, Saturday mornings, Emma reading by the pool, the gentle hum of the filter system instead of the constant shrieking that had become their soundtrack. That's when she heard it. The slam of a screen door that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. "Sarah! Sarah Martinez!" Karen Whitmore's voice cut through the morning air like a chainsaw through silk. Sarah didn't need to turn around to know what she'd see. Karen's signature power walk across the perfectly manicured lawn, her blonde hair bouncing with each aggressive step, her face already flushed with the kind of righteous indignation she wore like expensive perfume. Sarah took a deep breath and turned to face her neighbor. Karen had stopped at the property line, her hands planted firmly on her hips, wearing a tennis outfit that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Behind her, framed in their own back door, stood her 3 children. Tyler, 15, and already showing the entitled smirk that seemed to be genetic in the Whitmore family. Madison, 13, with perfectly straightened hair and a phone permanently attached to her hand, and little Bryce, 10 years old and currently bouncing a basketball against their house with mechanical persistence. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen's voice carried that particular pitch that suggested she was already 3 sentences into an argument Sarah hadn't agreed to have. "Good morning, Karen." Sarah's voice was carefully neutral, the tone she'd perfected during her 20-year career in customer service before the layoffs. "I'm having the pool removed. I can see that." Karen gestured wildly at the demolition crew, who had stopped their work to watch what was clearly shaping up to be better entertainment than cable television. "What I want to know is why you think you have the right to destroy my children's summer." Sarah felt something cold and sharp twist in her chest. "I'm sorry? Don't play dumb with me." Karen stepped closer to the fence line, close enough that Sarah could see the vein throbbing at her temple. "That pool has been the center of this neighborhood's social life for years. My kids have been planning their pool parties since school ended. Madison's Sweet 16 is supposed to be next month, and now you're going to ruin it because of what? Some petty grudge?" The coffee mug slipped from Sarah's fingers and shattered on the deck. The sound seemed to hang in the air for a moment, sharp and final. Pete and his crew were no longer pretending to work. They stood frozen, tools in hand, watching the drama unfold. Petty grudge? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried more weight than Karen's shouting. Is that what you call it when your children turn my backyard into their personal playground? When they jump my fence at all hours of the day and night? When they bring half the neighborhood over for pool parties without asking, leaving beer, cans and trash floating in my water? Karen's eyes flashed. Kids will be kids, Sarah. Maybe if you weren't such a control freak. Kids will be kids. Sarah stepped to the edge of her deck, her voice rising with each word. Your 15-year-old son brought a keg to my pool last weekend, Karen. A keg. My daughter found used condoms in my pool filter. Used condoms. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Bryce had stopped bouncing his basketball. Karen's face went through a series of color changes, pale, then red, then an interesting shade of purple that clashed with her tennis outfit. I don't believe you. Tyler would never... Ask him. Sarah pointed directly at Tyler, who suddenly found his shoes extremely interesting. Go ahead. Ask your perfect son about the party he threw while you and David were in Cabo last weekend. Ask him about the neighbors who called the police at 2 in the morning. Ask him about the girl who had to be taken to the hospital because she drank so much she couldn't stand up. Karen whirled around to look at her son, who was now backing slowly toward their house. Tyler? The silence stretched like a rubber band, about to snap. It wasn't a big deal, Tyler mumbled, still not looking up. Just some friends. Friends? Karen's voice could have shattered windows. But instead of directing her fury at her son, she spun back to face Sarah. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, you should have come to me. You should have talked to me instead of destroying property that affects the entire neighborhood. Sarah felt something inside her chest crack, like ice beginning to break up after a long winter. I did come to you, Karen. I came to you 6 months ago when your kids started using my pool without permission. I came to you 4 months ago when they broke my pool light and left glass all over the bottom. I came to you 2 months ago when Madison and her friends were having sleepovers in my backyard, complete with music until 3 in the morning. Each accusation hit Karen like a physical blow, but she rallied quickly. Those were isolated incidents. I came to you 3 weeks ago, Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger, when your children and their friends turned my pool area into some kind of fight club, complete with betting pools and video recordings that ended up on social media. I came to you 2 weeks ago when I found drug paraphernalia in my pool house. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Drug paraphernalia? Weed pipes, Karen. Vape pens. Empty bottles of pills that definitely didn't come from any pharmacy. Sarah's voice was steady now, each word carefully measured. I came to you every single time, and every single time you told me I was overreacting. That kids will be kids, that I needed to loosen up and let them have fun. The demolition crew was no longer even pretending to work. Pete had actually taken off his hard hat and was watching the confrontation with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for playoff games. But you know what really made me decide to tear down this pool? Sarah's voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing everyone to strain to hear her. It wasn't the parties. It wasn't the vandalism. It wasn't even the drugs. Karen leaned forward despite herself. What? It was when your son and his friends cornered my daughter in the pool house last Friday night. The words hung in the air, like smoke from a house fire. Karen went completely still. They didn't hurt her, Sarah continued, her voice shaking now. Not physically, but they made it very clear what they thought she owed them for letting her live in the same neighborhood as them. They made it very clear what they expected in exchange for not making her life at school a living hell. Karen's face had gone completely white. That's not possible. Tyler wouldn't. Tyler would. And Tyler did. Sarah pulled out her phone and held it up. Would you like to hear the recording Emma made? The one where your precious son Explains to my daughter exactly what services she needs to provide if she wants his friends to stop spreading rumors about her being a slut. The phone seemed to glow in Sarah's hand like a weapon. Karen stared at it for a long moment, then at her son, who was now pressed against the back door of their house like he was trying to melt into it. "Tyler," she said quietly, "come here." Tyler didn't move. "Tyler, get over here right now!" The boy shuffled forward like he was walking to his execution. The basketball Bryce had been bouncing rolled forgotten into the flower beds. "Is it true?" Karen's voice was barely audible. Tyler's eyes darted everywhere except his mother's face. "It's not. She's being dramatic." "Is it true?" The question exploded out of Karen like a gunshot. Tyler flinched and finally looked up. It wasn't. Sarah jerked awake to the sound of her garbage cans clattering across the driveway like oversized pinballs. Through her bedroom window, she could see the contents of a week's worth of trash scattered across her front lawn in a grotesque confetti pattern that stretched all the way to the street. Coffee grounds mixed with torn envelopes, banana peels draped over her prized rose bushes like yellow ribbons of humiliation. "Jesus," she muttered, throwing on a robe and slippers. The morning. Air was still cool, heavy with dew that made the garbage stick to everything it touched. She began picking up the mess piece by piece, her bare hands soon sticky with unidentifiable liquids that had leaked from torn bags. Across the street, old Mr. Peterson was retrieving his morning paper, watching her with the kind of careful neutrality. That meant word had already spread through the neighborhood. 2 houses down, Janet Kowalski was watering her petunias with suspicious timing, her eyes darting between her flowers and Sarah's humiliating cleanup operation. Sarah was stuffing the last of the debris into a fresh bag when she noticed the car. Karen's. White BMW was parked in her driveway, engine running, windows down. Karen herself was nowhere to be seen, but Sarah could hear her voice drifting from the backyard, bright and cheerful and completely inappropriate for the hour. "Such a shame about the pool," Karen was saying to someone. "Sarah always seemed so stable. But you know, after the divorce, some people just crack under pressure." Sarah felt her jaw clench. There had been no divorce. There had never even been a marriage. Sarah was a single mother by choice, something she'd never felt the need to explain to anyone, least of all Karen Whitmore. She dropped the garbage bag and walked around to the back of the house, where she found Karen standing in her own backyard, but speaking loud enough for half the block to hear. She was talking to Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down, an elderly woman who ran the neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network with the efficiency of a Cold War spy master. "Worried about Emma, you know," Karen continued, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Teenage girls are so impressionable. When their mothers start having mental health episodes, that's enough." Both women turned to look at Sarah, who was standing at her property line in her bathrobe, her hair uncombed, her hands still dirty from cleaning up garbage. She knew exactly how she looked, and she knew exactly how that would play into whatever narrative Karen was building. "Oh, Sarah." Karen's smile was as bright as a knife blade. "I was just telling Mrs. Chen how concerned we all are about you. The stress you must be under making such drastic decisions. Tearing down that beautiful pool." She shook her head sadly. "Well, grief makes people do strange things." "Grief?" Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. "The job loss? The financial strain? Raising a teenager alone?" Karen ticked off each item on her manicured fingers like she was reading from a grocery list. "It's understandable that you might lash out at the neighbors who've only ever tried to help." Mrs. Chen was watching this exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing a traffic accident in slow motion. Sarah realized that this wasn't a casual conversation. This was a performance, carefully staged for maximum damage. "Help?" Sarah stepped closer to the fence. "Is that what you call it when your son threatens my daughter?" Karen's smile never wavered. "Oh, Sarah, you know how teenagers exaggerate. Tyler feels terrible about any misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. And we're all just hoping you can get the help you need. Professional help. Karen's eyes glittered with malicious sincerity. There are such wonderful resources available for single mothers dealing with stress-related paranoia. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Mrs. Chen was nodding along sympathetically, her phone discreetly recording what would undoubtedly become the neighborhood's entertainment for the next month. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, to defend herself, to explain what had really happened. Then she closed it. Karen wasn't interested in the truth. She was interested in winning, and she'd already chosen her battlefield. "Have a nice day, Karen," Sarah said quietly, and walked back toward her house. Behind her, she could hear Karen's voice rising slightly, making sure her final shot found its target. "We're all praying for her. It's just so sad when someone loses their grip on reality like this." Sarah made it to her kitchen before her hands started shaking. Emma was already downstairs, dressed for school, her backpack slung over her shoulder. She'd heard everything. "Mom!" "It's fine." Sarah's voice was too bright, too quick. "She's just... People talk, it doesn't matter." But even as she said it, Sarah knew it wasn't true. In a neighborhood like Maple Street, reputation was currency, and Karen had just declared economic warfare. Emma hesitated by the door. "Maybe I should stay home today." "Absolutely not." Sarah forced her voice to steady. "You have a calc test, remember? And student council nominations are this afternoon." Emma bit her lip. What if she tells people at school? About Tyler, about the pool, about what she just said? Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Karen's children went to the same school as Emma, the same small, gossipy high school where reputation could make or break a teenager's entire social world. "Then we deal with it," Sarah said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. "Go on. You'll be late." After Emma left, Sarah stood in her kitchen and tried to make sense of what was happening. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been an unauthorized pool party. Now she was apparently the neighborhood's latest cautionary tale about single motherhood and mental instability. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Heard about your pool situation. If you need someone to talk to about teenage troubles, I'm here. Janet K." Then another. "Sarah, honey, I hope you're taking care of yourself. This kind of stress can really affect a person's judgment." Beth Morrison, from the PTA, and another. "My sister went through something similar after her husband left. There are support groups." Lisa Sarah stared at the messages with growing horror. Karen had been busy. She was still staring at her phone when it rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Hello? Ms. Martinez. This is Principal Davidson from Oakwood High. I was hoping we could schedule a meeting to discuss Emma's situation." Sarah's blood went cold. "What situation?" "Well, I've received some concerning information about potential instability in your home environment. Nothing official, of course, but when there are questions about a student's safety and well-being..." The phone slipped from Sarah's numb fingers and clattered to the floor. Through the kitchen window, she could see Karen in her backyard, watering flowers that didn't need watering, humming softly to herself. Sarah picked up her phone. The principal was still talking, something about resources and support services, and the school's obligation to investigate any concerns about student welfare. "I'll call you back," Sarah managed and hung up. She walked to the window and looked out at the concrete rubble that had once been her pool. The demolition crew would be back today to haul away the debris and fill in the hole. By tomorrow, there would be nothing left but a flat patch of disturbed earth where her dreams of summer peace had once sparkled in the sun. But as she watched Karen's performance for whatever neighbor might be observing, Sarah realized that the pool had never been the real problem. The real problem was that she'd forgotten the first rule of suburban warfare: never underestimate a woman who has nothing to lose and everything to protect. Karen wasn't just angry about the pool. She was terrified that her children's behavior would become public knowledge, that her carefully constructed image as the perfect suburban mother would crumble under scrutiny. So she was doing what cornered animals always do. She was attacking. First, creating a narrative that painted Sarah as unstable and unreliable. It was brilliant, actually. Sociopathic, but brilliant. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Emma. "Everyone at school is talking about you. They're saying you had a breakdown and that's why you destroyed the pool. Tyler is telling people you threatened him." Sarah closed her eyes and felt the last of her naivety drain away like water from a broken pool. Karen hadn't just escalated the conflict, she'd changed the entire nature of the war. This wasn't about property damage anymore. It wasn't about teenage parties or neighborhood disputes. This was about survival. Sarah looked out at Karen's house, at the perfect lawn and the perfect flowers and the perfect facade that hid 3 entitled children and 2 parents who thought money and status could buy them immunity from consequences. Then she walked to her computer and began typing. If Karen wanted to play dirty, Sarah would show her what dirty really looked like. The first Google search was for Tyler Whitmore's social media accounts. The second was for private investigators who specialized in background checks. The third was for the phone number of the local newspaper's investigative reporter. Karen had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed that a single mother with a customer service background would be easy to destroy. She was about to learn that customer service professionals knew more about documentation, evidence gathering, and systematic problem solving than she'd ever imagined. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard as she began building her own dossier. Every incident, every conversation. The anonymous packages arrived like clockwork at 3:17 p.m., delivered by a courier service to 7 different houses on Maple Street. Each manila envelope contained the same contents: photocopied police reports, printed screenshots from social media, financial records, and a single typed note that read, "Thought you should know what kind of people you're really living next to." Sarah watched from behind her living room curtains as her neighbors emerged from their houses, packages in hand, faces shifting from curiosity to shock to something much darker. Mrs. Patterson from 2 doors down actually dropped hers, papers, scattering across her driveway like toxic snow. By 4 p.m., the neighborhood phone tree was ablaze. By 5 p.m., Karen's perfect world had begun to crumble. Sarah's phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters wanting statements, lawyers offering services, neighbors demanding explanations. She'd ignored them all, focusing instead on the main event unfolding across the street. The first crack appeared when David Whitmore came home early from work, his Mercedes sliding into the driveway with the aggressive precision of a man who'd received some very unpleasant phone calls. Sarah watched him storm into the house, his usually perfect posture rigid with fury. The second crack came 20 minutes later when a black sedan with government plates parked in front of the Whitmore house. 2 men in conservative suits got out, consulted clipboards, and rang the doorbell with the patient authority of people who were used to getting answers. The third crack was audible from 3 blocks away. "You did what?" David's voice carried across the neighborhood like a foghorn. Through the Whitmore's open windows, Sarah could hear the sounds of what could generously be called a domestic discussion, and more accurately described as mutual assured. "Destruction! Told you to handle it quietly. Do you have any idea what this is going to cost us? Your precious son who started this whole mess. IRS audit because of your charity scam." "My charity scam? What about your construction? Permits?" Emma had come home from school to find her mother sitting calmly in the kitchen, eating a sandwich and watching the chaos unfold like it was premium cable television. "Mom," Emma said slowly, "did you send those packages?" Sarah took another bite of her sandwich. "What packages?" "The ones that have Tyler's dad screaming loud enough to wake the dead and half the neighborhood standing in their driveways looking like someone stole Christmas." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Sarah said serenely. "Would you like a sandwich? I made tuna salad." Emma stared at her mother for a long moment, then slowly began to smile. "You're terrifying when you want to be, you know that?" "I prefer thorough," Sarah replied. "It's a customer service thing." The sound of a door slamming echoed across the street, followed by the screech of tires as Karen's BMW reversed out of the driveway at dangerous speed. Through the kitchen window, they watched her car disappear around the corner, leaving behind a trail of burned rubber and neighborhood gossip that would last for months. "Where do you think she's going?" Emma asked. "Damage control," Sarah said. "She's probably trying to figure out how many bridges she can still burn before the whole structure collapses." She was right. Karen's first stop was the home of Janet Kowalski, the neighborhood's second most influential gossip after Mrs. Chen. Sarah knew this because Mrs. Chen had called to provide a real-time update. "She's in Janet's living room right now," Mrs. Chen reported, her voice crackling with excitement. "Crying, from what I can see through the windows. Janet's making her tea, but her body language says she's not buying whatever Karen's selling." "And the federal agents?" "Still at the Whitmore house. David let them in about 10 minutes ago. One of them was carrying a laptop case. The other had a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain someone's entire financial life." Sarah hung up and immediately called her private investigator. "How long before the IRS audit becomes public record?" "Depends on what they find," came the reply. "But based on the preliminary information you provided, I'd say David Whitmore's going to have bigger problems than an unauthorized pool party. His company's been using undocumented workers and falsifying safety inspections for at least 2 years. The city's going to want to re-examine every building permit he's issued." "And Karen's charity?" "Classic shell game. Money comes in from donations, gets filtered through 3 different accounts, and ends up paying for family vacations, private school tuition, and what appears to be a very expensive shopping habit. The IRS tends to take a dim view of that kind of creative accounting." After hanging up, Sarah felt a moment of something that might have been guilt. She'd destroyed a family's life in the span of 6 hours using nothing but publicly available information and a talent for systematic research. Then she remembered Emma's face when she'd come home from school 3 weeks ago, shaking and refusing to explain why she'd hidden in the bathroom during lunch. She remembered the recording on Emma's phone, Tyler's voice casually discussing which of Emma's friends might be more cooperative if Emma continued to refuse his demands. The guilt evaporated like morning dew. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she recognized. Oakwood High School. "Ms. Martinez? This is Principal Davidson. I wanted to call and apologize for this morning's conversation. After speaking with several students and reviewing some new information, it's clear that I was misinformed about your family's situation." "New information?" "Well, it seems that Tyler Whitmore has been making some very serious accusations that don't align with the facts. In light of his previous disciplinary issues that were apparently not properly disclosed during his transfer process, we'll be conducting a thorough investigation into his conduct at our school." Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "I appreciate the call, Principal Davidson. There is one more thing. We've received reports that Tyler may have been recording inappropriate videos on school property. If your daughter has any information, that might help our investigation." "I'll have Emma call you tomorrow," Sarah said. By 7 p.m., the entire street looked like a disaster zone. Police cars were parked in front of 3 different houses. A news van had set up at the corner, its satellite dish extended like a mechanical sunflower tracking scandal across the suburban landscape. David Whitmore had left in his Mercedes and hadn't returned. Karen's BMW was still missing in action. The only sign of life from the Whitmore house was Tyler, who could be seen through his bedroom window frantically doing something on his computer, probably deleting evidence if Sarah's experience with teenage damage control was any indication. Emma was at the kitchen table, supposedly doing homework but actually providing commentary on the ongoing drama like a sports announcer. "Madison just came out to get the mail and started crying when she saw the news van," Emma reported. And Bryce is sitting on their front steps bouncing that stupid basketball like nothing's happening, but you can tell he knows something's wrong, because he keeps looking around like he's waiting for someone to explain what's going on. Sarah felt a twinge of sympathy for the younger children. Madison and Bryce hadn't done anything wrong. They were just collateral damage in a war their parents and older brother had started. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you've done." Sarah showed the message to Emma, who snorted with derision. "She's texting you threats now? How pathetic is that?" "Pretty pathetic," Sarah agreed. But as she looked out at the chaos unfolding across her street, she wondered if Karen might be right about one thing. Maybe she really didn't know what she'd done. The thought was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Through the peephole, Sarah could see Mrs. Chen standing on her porch, holding a bottle of wine and wearing the expression of someone who had news to share. "I brought Pinot Grigio," Mrs. Chen announced when Sarah opened the door, "and information." They settled in the living room, where Mrs. Chen poured wine with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades navigating Washington, D.C. power lunches. "Karen's been making the rounds," she began without preamble. "Janet's house first, then the Morrisons, then the Pattersons. She's trying to build a coalition, convince people that you're unstable and dangerous. Is it working?" Mrs. Chen's smile was sharp as broken glass. She made one critical error. She assumed that people would take her word over documentary evidence, but when faced with police reports, financial records, and recordings of her son making sexual threats against a minor, she shook her head. People tend to believe what they can see and hear rather than what they're told to believe. So she's not finding allies? Oh, she found one. Beth Morrison is absolutely convinced that you're a vindictive single mother who's trying to destroy a good family out of jealousy. Mrs. Chen took a delicate sip of wine. Of course, Beth's husband was arrested for tax evasion 3 years ago, and she's still convinced it was a government conspiracy, so her judgment isn't exactly reliable. Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. "What about the others?" "The Tao. Kowalskis want to know if you have any dirt on the people who've been letting their dog use their prize petunias as a bathroom. The Pattersons are asking if you can help them document their neighbor's illegal home business. And the Chens, that would be my nephew's family down the block, want to know if you can prove that." Karen Whitmore's BMW was found at 6:32 a.m. in the parking lot of the Greyhound bus station. Keys still in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat, cell phone buzzing unanswered with calls from her attorney. The security footage showed her boarding the 11:47 p.m. bus to Chicago, carrying nothing but a small overnight bag and the haunted expression of someone who'd finally run out of lies to tell. She left behind a house in chaos, 3 children who didn't understand why their mother had abandoned them, and a husband who'd spent the night in federal custody, answering very uncomfortable questions about money laundering and construction fraud. Sarah learned this from Detective Rodriguez, who called at 7 a.m. with updates that kept getting more surreal. "We executed search warrants on both the Whitmore house and David's construction office last night," Rodriguez explained. "What we found? Let's just say your pool situation was the tip of a very large iceberg." "What kind of iceberg?" "The kind involving offshore accounts, falsified inspection reports, and a network of shell companies that would make a cartel accountant proud." David Whitmore wasn't just cutting corners on construction projects. He was running a full-scale money laundering operation through his charity work and construction contracts. Sarah sat down heavily at her kitchen table. Emma was eating cereal across from her, openly eavesdropping with the shameless intensity of a teenager who'd realized that real life was far more dramatic than anything on Netflix. "And Tyler? That's actually why I'm calling. We need you and Emma to come in today. We've recovered his computer, and what we found, it's extensive. Videos, photos, text messages, social media harassment campaigns targeting at least 12 different girls from 3 different schools. This goes back years, Ms. Martinez. Your daughter wasn't his first victim. She was just the one who finally had a mother willing to fight back." After hanging up, Sarah looked across the table at Emma, who had stopped eating and was staring at her bowl like it contained secrets. "Em, you okay?" Emma looked up, and Sarah was surprised to see tears in her eyes. "I keep thinking about Madison and Bryce. They didn't do anything wrong, and now their whole world is falling apart. Their mom is gone, their dad's in jail, their brother's probably going to prison." Sarah reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "I know. I feel bad for them, too. But, sweetheart, what was I supposed to do? Let Tyler keep hurting you? Let him move on to hurting other girls?" "No," Emma said quickly. "No, you did the right thing. It's a lot, you know? Yesterday, Tyler Whitmore was just the asshole who threw parties in our pool. Today, he's like a predator. And I keep thinking about all the times he cornered me at school, all the things he said that I thought were just him being a jerk, and realizing that it was actually more than that." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "We're going to make sure. He can't hurt anyone else, ever." They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Through the peephole, Sarah could see a woman in her 40s with short auburn hair and the kind of professional bearing that suggested either law enforcement or high-end real estate. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Agent Jennifer Holbrook, FBI Financial Crimes Division." The woman held up a badge and credentials. "I was hoping we could talk about the Whitmore family's financial activities." Sarah let her in, noting that Agent Holbrook's eyes immediately went to the back window that overlooked the space where the pool used to be. "Interesting timing on the pool removal," Holbrook observed, settling into the living room chair that Mrs. Chen had occupied the night before. "Most people would have just installed better security, maybe some cameras." "Most people don't have teenage daughters," Sarah replied. Holbrook nodded approvingly. "Smart. Eliminate the attraction entirely rather than trying to control access." She pulled out a tablet and stylus. "I understand you did some research into the Whitmore family's background before this all exploded." "Some." "What made you dig deeper?" Most people would have stopped after finding Tyler's previous school issues. Sarah considered the question. "Karen made it personal when she tried to paint me as mentally unstable. Once someone decides to destroy your reputation, you have two choices: take it or make sure they can't finish the job. And you decided not to take it. I decided to fight back with facts instead of rumors." Holbrook made notes on her tablet. "The financial irregularities you uncovered, the charity discrepancies, the construction permit issues, how did you piece that together? 20 years in customer service teaches you that every complaint has a paper trail, and every paper trail tells a story. I just followed the breadcrumbs." Sarah paused. "Plus, Karen made the mistake of trying to use her charity work as evidence of her moral superiority. That made me curious about whether her public image matched reality. It didn't. Not even close." The Maple Street Children's Foundation exists primarily to pay for Karen's lifestyle while providing tax deductions for her husband's construction business. They've donated maybe 10% of their stated charitable contributions to actual children's causes. Holbrook's stylus moved rapidly across her tablet. "You have documentation for that?" "I have receipts, bank records, IRS filings, and a spreadsheet that cross-references claimed donations with actual disbursements." Sarah stood up and retrieved a thick folder from her desk. "I also have phone records showing that Karen made several calls to offshore account managers in the Cayman Islands after our pool confrontation, and wire transfer records suggesting she was trying to move money out of the country." The FBI agent flipped through the folder with the focused attention of someone who'd seen plenty of financial crimes, but rarely had them served up with such meticulous organization. "Ms. Martinez, have you ever considered a career in law enforcement?" "I like helping people solve problems," Sarah said. "Customer service, investigation work. It's all basically the same skill set." Holbrook was quiet for several minutes, reading through Sarah's documentation. Finally, she looked up with an expression that might have been admiration. You realize you've essentially handed us a complete case file? Financial fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, charitable fraud, conspiracy. To obstruct justice, we usually spend months gathering this kind of evidence. I had motivation. I can see that. Holbrook closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. There's something else. We've been tracking David Whitmore's construction company for 6 months as part of a larger investigation into city corruption. Your research has filled in gaps we didn't even know existed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Larger investigation? City permits, zoning approvals, safety inspections? There's been a pattern of irregularities that we've been trying to connect. David Whitmore's companies have been involved in projects worth over $50 million, all of which bypassed normal oversight procedures. Your documentation shows how the money flowed through the charity and offshore accounts to pay bribes and kickbacks. Emma, who'd been quietly listening from the kitchen doorway, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean other people are going to get in trouble too? Holbrook glanced at Sarah, who nodded permission to answer. Potentially, yes. When you follow money in cases like this, it usually leads to more money and more people who were willing to look the other way for the right price. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Mrs. Chen's number. You need to see the news, Mrs. Chen said without preamble. Channel 7 right now. Sarah grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news, where a perfectly coiffed reporter was standing in front of City Hall with the kind of expression that suggested someone important was about to have a very bad day. Resignation of City Planning Director Michael Torres following allegations of corruption and bribery in connection with the ongoing Whitmore construction investigation. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Torres received hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments disguised as charitable donations in exchange for expediting building permits and waiving safety inspections. The screen switched to footage of a man in an expensive suit being led away in handcuffs, his face hidden behind a lawyer's briefcase. Torres is the third city official to be arrested this morning, the reporter continued. FBI agents raided City Hall at dawn, seizing computers and financial records as part of what sources describe as the largest municipal corruption investigation in county history. Agent Holbrook was watching the television with satisfaction. Torres was David Whitmore's inside man at the city. He's been on our watch list for months, but we could never prove the connection. Your charity documentation provided the missing link. Sarah stared at the screen where the reporter was now standing in front of a construction site with yellow FBI tape stretched across the entrance. The Riverside Shopping Complex, currently under construction by Whitmore Development, has been shut down pending investigation into whether proper safety protocols were followed. The complex was scheduled to open next month, with over 40 retail tenants and an estimated economic impact of $200 million. How many people are going to lose their jobs because of this? Sarah asked quietly. How many people would have been hurt or killed if those buildings had been constructed with substandard materials and falsified safety inspections? Holbrook countered. Torres was approving projects that should never have been built. We,